Speaking of pitting groups against each other, let's turn our attention to Al Sharpton and his National Action Network. They had a big event this week, and one of the best things to come out of it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her black dialect she went into when addressing the crowd.
Thank you all. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you all so much for coming together and gathering today, because this is what organizing looks like.
That's right.
This is what building power looks like. This is what changing the country looks like.
Now, I don't think this is something to get too excited about, because the accent, that is. It's not like Hot Sauce Hillary and her pandering. You get the sense that AOC was just sort of slipping into it naturally, rather than a sort of poll-tested kind of, a committee didn't tell her that this is what how she should be speaking. If you don't remember, Hillary was on a podcast, a black hosted podcast, Breakfast Club, when she trotted out that she carried hot sauce around with her in the last. In fact, let's play it. Including, there was a beautiful candid. Well, listen to the end. That's the real Hillary.
No more questions? They said no, she has to go.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you getting information right now?
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag, swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now listen, I
yes.
just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people.
Okay. Is it working?
Not enough, Hillary. Just wasn't working enough. Well, let's get back to AOC addressing the assembled.
Reverend, you bring up a funny anecdote, and I'm proud to be a bartender. Ain't nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with working retail, folding clothes for other people to buy. There is nothing wrong with preparing the food that your neighbors will eat.
Oh, girl, go on.
There is nothing wrong with driving the buses that take your family to work. There is nothing wrong with being a working person in the United States of America, and there is everything dignified about it.
If you didn't know, what that is all about is Donald Trump insulted AOC by saying that the Green New Deal done by a young bartender, 29 years old, a young bartender, wonderful woman. So that's her rebuke to him, that this is all dignified work, which, of course, he never said it wasn't. But you know what's not dignified work in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's world? Any work at all that doesn't pay at least $15 an hour. That's right. That's right. If you can't command $15 an hour for your labor, AOC doesn't think your work has dignity. In fact, she thinks you should be locked up, as well as the person who you convinced to pay you the less than $15 an hour for selling your labor for less. You should just go on welfare and shut up, I guess. And that's a great lead into our next story about Candace Owens and what happened at the hate crimes hearing on the Hill. But before we get to that, the other thing is, it's not cool to associate with Al Sharpton. I guess Ms. Ocasio-Cortez is probably too young to remember Freddie's Fashion Mart or Tawana Brawley, but Al Sharpton was somehow able to rehabilitate himself through the Obama presidency. But I haven't forgotten, and the residents of Crown Heights haven't forgotten, and neither should you forget that Al Sharpton is an anti-Semite and an anti-white bigot with blood on his hands. That's how Al Sharpton gets his powers, by dividing people on the basis of their race, by creating that division, by nurturing and watering and giving sunshine and playing music for hatred, for racial division, because that's how Al Sharpton gets his power. He's not talented in any particular way that gives him great money and influence, or influence that he can then turn into money. That's his hustle. So he can't say, I want to be a powerful person, so please support me Nobody's going to do that. He has to rally them around a cause. Well, the easiest and most effective way to do that, the low-hanging fruit, is their racial identity. And that's what he does. That's what he exploits. And once in a while, he probably does a good job actually demanding justice for some underrepresented person who wouldn't otherwise get it. But mostly, what he does is tries to use racial differences in order to elevate his own position in power and to make money. And that's why he should be rejected by people who wish to be taken seriously, like congresspersons. Have you heard the charge that Democrats don't wish blacks to succeed, and even black identity progressive Democrat groups don't want blacks to succeed because then where would their power come from? Well, I've heard that a little bit, but I don't think that many Democrat politicians have heard it in Congress. And that's what Candace Owens brought to the table this week with her testimony before the House Committee on Hate Crimes, where she appeared as the victim survivor of hate crimes against her because she was a conservative, as well as just generic anti-black racist people telling her that they were going to bomb her house and calling her the N-word. And that was the son of the former governor of Connecticut. Yeah, that's right. That's who did the hate crime to her. And here she is talking about how the NAACP, how they used her, for instance.
The media turned it into a firestorm, and it became a political tool for people to gain power. The NAACP used me at that time, would just meet me outside of the school with cameras in tow to speak out against the crimes. Of course, now I'm older, and I realize that that's really just a fundraising mechanism, and that a lot of these groups survive because they cannot have the problem fixed, ever. The NAACP never wants racism to go away.
Ms. Owens is terribly inconvenient for the progressive left because she is a black woman who was a victim of a hate crime, and yet at the same time stands up and says no to the whole Democrat progressive victimhood industry mentality political movement. Well, that's untenable for them. So what happens? Well, if you haven't heard the clip, Ted Lieu, a Democrat congressman from California, goes full on, she's a Nazi.
All right, so my first question is to Ms. Hershinoff. Ms. Owens said, quote, if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. So when people try to legitimize Adolf Hitler, does that feed into white nationalist ideology?
Of Eileen Hershinoff, another witness from the Anti-Defamation League, and we'll get to her in just a second, but Ms. Owens can't respond because the question wasn't asked to her. So he calls her a Nazi sympathizer, basically, and then addresses the question to somebody else. But thankfully, another Republican basically gives her the floor after that to respond to Mr. Lieu. And here's what she has to say.
Yes, I think it's pretty apparent that Mr. Lieu believes that black people are stupid and will not pursue the full clip in its entirety. He purposely presented an extracted clip.
The witness will suspend for a moment. It is not proper to refer disparagingly or to a member of the committee. The witness will not do that again. The witness may continue.
Sure, even though I was called despicable.
The witness may not refer to a member of the committee as stupid.
I didn't refer to him as stupid. That's not what I said. That's not what I said at all. You didn't listen to what I said. May I continue?
Please.
As I said, he is assuming that black people will not go pursue the full 2-hour clip.
And of course, we learn that she did not, in fact, defend Adolf Hitler at all. She was talking about nationalism, and in that capacity was discussing him. And if it's a surprise to you, she's not calling for genocide, nor is she in defense of it when Hitler did it. But hey, that wasn't the point anyway. The point was merely to get her off the point and get everybody else off the point. The self-appointed groups that advance black people's interests may not be advancing their interests, and in fact, may be harming their interests. Well, that's a message that Candace Owens is spreading, and it's one they cannot abide because it will mean their electoral destruction, their political irrelevance. And so it must be stopped at all costs. So we have the reductio ad Hitlerum. Well, let's turn our attention back to Ms. Eileen Hershinoff. She's from the Anti-Defamation League, and she was brought to the committee, as best I can tell, to defame President Donald Trump, who she lets us know when he goes to be president, that's when racism explodes in the country. Not that it's his fault or anything.
And the report that we released today shows that there was an increase, a doubling, 100% doubling of anti-Semitic slurs and content on the channels that the murderer, Bowers, in Pittsburgh, and the murderer in New Zealand looked at, and Gavin Aitchan, and a huge increase in racism since the 2016 election. I am not saying that anybody, one person, one elected official caused that, but there are corollaries there that we need to understand and we need to look at. We need to look at the data.
I'm not saying that President Trump has anything to do with it, but at the same time, President Trump has something to do with it, and that's what we need to look at. Well, what does the data show us? Does it have anything to do with the fact that the mainstream media and you and your allies have been driving a narrative that if you support Donald Trump, you are a racist, you are a white supremacist? Could that have something to do with it? Who is dividing the world up into tribal lines, whether it's race or sex or anything else? Is it Donald Trump or is it the left who's telling you in every way possible that it's all about what you look like or your immutable characteristics that are the important ways to classify people? So let's couple that racial identity push along with the other push, which is that if you happen to be white, you're not allowed to have a racial identity that's any good, or if you're male, or if you're heterosexual. In fact, it's so important. From the same hearing, I couldn't believe it when I heard it. This is Kristen Clark of the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, which is an organization for racial justice and economic justice. That means it's commie, by the way, because what you want, if you want freedom and liberty, is individual justice. Racial justice means the color of your skin is what's important, or economic justice means if you're rich or poor is important, rather than your individual actions. She's so bought into racial identity and politics that the one concern that she brings before the committee, now let's remember this is the Committee on Hate Crimes, is that the FBI has developed a category for black people that wish to commit crimes against others because of racial hatred. Let's take a listen.
The final thing that I will note is that we're deeply concerned about the FBI's Black Identity Extremist designation. This is mere distraction from the very real threat of white supremacy that we face today.
Why is that distraction? Why is that a distraction?
Because it is not real. It is not a real threat. It harkens back to the dark days of our federal government abusing its power to go after civil rights activists during the heyday of the civil rights movement. There is no such thing as black identity extremism. Again, this is mere distraction to take the public's attention and the government's resources away from white supremacy and white nationalism, which are the real threats that we're up against today.
Now, the Black Identity Extremist designation is not opposed because it's been applied wrongly. And she's not saying, oh, well, the FBI is spending the same amount of time and money on black extremists as white supremacists, and since there are many more white supremacists, that's a problem of resource allocation. No. That's not her argument. Her argument is that any recognition by the FBI that there may be black people motivated by race when they commit attacks on others is completely unacceptable. Well, it just doesn't fit her worldview and narrative, right? Guess again. It's breathtaking. Black people can't commit a hate crime because they're black? That's what you get when you have collective notions of justice, or notions of justice that don't have to do with individual behavior and activity. Look, the right answer for all these questions of justice is what your mom should have taught you when you were a kid, which is keep your hands to yourself. That goes for everyone. That's the rule for everyone. Keep your hands to yourself, and then we don't have to worry about what race you are, what your identity is, what sex you are, or anything else. There was a case a few weeks ago out of New York where a black trans woman was assaulting white people because they were white. She would say, basically scream at them a bunch of curses because they were white and spray pepper spray in their face. I think she got like 8 or 9 people. Now, this is a transsexual black person. Are they incapable because they're trans or because they're black of committing crimes against other people on the basis of their immutable characteristics? Well, that's what the Lawyers Committee of Civil Rights would have you believe. I guess it's the Lawyers Committee, though, for civil rights just for some people. The rest of us, well, we just don't have the complexion for the connection. April 13th is Christopher Hitchens' birthday. I've been trying to sell you on Christopher Hitchens' Memorial Day, and there is a great Hitchens quote on point here, as so many are. For those who think that being in the popular majority is somehow protection from the consequences of their ideas that they support and espouse, it is not. I'll leave you with Mr. Hitchens. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell a friend. This is Scott DeCosenza for LibertyNation.com, your home for conservatarian news and analysis, 24/7, 365 at LibertyNation.com. Bye-bye.
Don't take refuge in the false security of consensus and the feeling that whatever you think, you're bound to be okay because you're in the safely moral majority.